it sort of falls into this category a little bit of like everything is symbolic, everything is ceremonial, nothing is functional. I'm fascinated by these temples because it goes back to something you were saying earlier. And I use this analogy to kind of set the stage for it. Imagine if Younger Dryas happened to us tomorrow, whatever, right? Hope, touch wood, doesn't. But say it wipes out civilization, but we survive as humans. Within, 2-3 generations, we're sitting around campfires telling stories about fucking these things that were like a black rock, and it's just, and you know, it's like, or plasma TVs, but you say, look, if you get this shiny black rock, you know, you can get answers from the ancestors. You will know everything. You can talk to anything. You can see anything.
You can ask it questions.
You can ask it questions.
Yeah.
And maybe you go and you start getting black rocks and making them like this, and you start dancing around the fire. You start ritualizing this memory of technology. Now,
right.
If you take that concept, like say there's a cataclysm and now there's people that remember and they tell these stories, the stories get passed down. Now imagine there's a civilization that comes up and it goes through thousands of years of structuring those legends and stories of technology. That goes through just distortions and representations and symbolism, but it's just twisting all of these stories into this iconography and this complex symbolism that we then, I think, we go to a temple in Egypt that was made in the Ptolemaic era or whatever, and you see things on the wall. And I think there's a great way to interpret some of those symbols and some of the paintings to say that, well, is this actually an echo of something that was functional, or is an echo of technology? Like every staff that you see has a tuning fork on the bottom of it. Every single one on these walls, it's always got a tuning fork on it. What's that all about?
Tuning fork.
Tuning fork, like a little like a tuning fork. Yeah, all of the staffs with the was head, that means power. Like literally the interpretation of this symbol is power on top of the staff, and every single one of them has a tuning fork on the bottom.
Can we see an image of that?
Yeah, you can look up any of the temples in Egypt and like the depictions of gods with staffs and they're touching, or they're giving like the Jed pillar, or the Ankh, which is Jed pillar is stability. The Ankh is life. The Was is power. So in a lot of cases, these gods are granting kings, life, stability, and power, or sometimes just life and power. But
what are those depictions of these enormous cylindrical things that they're holding that look almost like one of those
like a transformer?
Indian clubs? Yeah.
Like that one there, that's like the Jed pillar here.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
That's a great image. That literally is the symbol for stability.
Like
and
that thing down is what I was talking about.
The quote unquote light bulbs, yes, at Dendera Temple. And see, there's a Jed pillar there too with the hands. So the Jed pillar is stabilizing it with its hands.
Right.
And you're on a boat. You're actually part of this is on a boat.
It looks like some kind of technology.
So you know what's crazy about this? So again, we get down into this. This is in a crypt at Dendera. You have to like crawl through a hole and get. It's like an inside wall. It's amazing because the Christians and they didn't get into the crypt, so they couldn't deface the glyphs. Like a lot of the glyphs are defaced.
Look at that guy. He looks like an air traffic controller.
Well, he's like a reptilian too. He's a frog dude with knives.
Yeah, what is that dude?
With a tail.
Does he have a fucking tail?
Yeah, he does.
He does look like he looks like a giant frog man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what's crazy about there is a whole story about this. And it's written on the walls. And again, this is thanks to my friend Yusuf Ayawan, who I guide with, and then Professor Jabra, who can interpret this. And I'm going to do a video about this soon, because what he is saying about this crypt is that it tells you on the wall that there was a physical version of that thing in that crypt. He said it was made from mostly gold, and it was the span of like a dude with his arms out, like the span of a human wingspan, basically.
I was stumbling across something. They called it electrum. There was these two.
The metal.
Stole these 3.3 ton obelisk that were made out of a metal called electrum.
Electrum,
like gold and
silver.
Yeah,
electrum's gold. And so they definitely used gold and silver. A lot of the obelisks had electrum tips, they think.
Great for conductivity.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, I mean,
which is really the only good reason to have it, other than looking good.
Right. Yeah.
Other than balling.
Other than balling, which they were balling. Trust me.
It's going to be a little bit of a sidetrack, but when you're talking about the nuclear stuff, I found these stories of the Oklo mine in Gabon, which is nuclear, natural nuclear
Reactor. Wow.
Whoa.
That is very
4
old.
billion years old and 100,000 working.
They
Oldest
pull out
nuclear reactor in
enriched
history.
uranium from it.
Oh, okay. It's
What?
enriching uranium. It's probably
Natural
Yeah.
enriched uranium.
yeah. Imagine if it's
Whoa.
It's in Africa, so I don't know if that was the only place they've ever found. But
That makes sense, right? And then,
in Africa.
is there something like that in Afghanistan where this stone came from?
Oh, the lapis lazuli and everything else.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I assume that I wouldn't be surprised if that sort of thing is happening somewhere in the massive uranium in Australia either, because that's like one of the world's biggest uranium deposits. I imagine if it's enough mass I think it's uranium 238, and they're trying to get 235 to get to 238, or the other way around. But if there's enough mass and neutrons hitting each other, it might be enriching it somehow. I think that's probably what's happening there. I'm no nuclear scientist, so.
Right.
Say the wrong thing.
Let's go back to those hieroglyphs, Jamie.
Yeah.
The lizard guy, the frog guy, or whatever that reptilian thing is, that freaks me out.
Oh yeah, it's the stuff of nightmares at times. It's kind of weird.
Because that's, one of the things that the weirdest, the weirdest stories when they start talking about aliens is the different types that visit.
Right.
And that one of them is a reptilian species that are the most creepy to deal with, which makes sense.
Heard the same thing. It would be. Yeah, I mean that
just
reptilian
like reptiles
brain.
on Earth.
Like chickens are assholes, you know?
Right, they are. And so are Komodo dragons. And the idea that somehow or another they could eventually reach incredible levels of technological sophistication and intelligence. We kind of rule that out. But look, there's clearly primates that are way dumber than us, right?
Oh, for sure.
So why do we assume that it's only primates that reach an incredible high level of sophistication when we know that crows, which are really fucking close to dinosaurs, crows, super smart, like smarter than most kids.
Yeah, problem solving smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I don't think you can't put a restrictor on what evolution might produce.
Not at all.
In any of these,
especially when intelligence is being exhibited by things that are really close evolutionarily to reptiles.
Yes. Yeah, and that would just be, you get to that, like, just lack of empathy, just that reptilian brain.
Right.
It's just aggression, and, like, everything that's not us is the enemy kind
That's
of deal.
the mindfuck is smart dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? That was in Jurassic Park, right? The raptors, they were
Clever
super
girl.
smart. Yeah, they were smart,
Yeah.
which, makes sense.
Yeah, it's that whole pack, the instinct.
But the idea that we were visited by intelligent reptiles is fucking bananas.
Yeah, with the aliens, I don't often address it. But I put it firmly in the realm of like possible. Like it's just I think when you look at the vastness of space and the length of time, the fact that we're just this crazy. There could have massive civilizations galactically could have risen and fallen a million years ago, and we just weren't part of it. And that's literally a blink of the eye in those sort of time frames. We just. It's not surprising, this the Fermi Paradox, right? Like, how come we haven't got, like, firm proof or anything, even though people will say we have. But it's like, yes, it's the length of time. Like, we can rise and fall. That span of a million years is just nothing on those time scales. And, whole species can rise to massive prominence and then just be nothing but dust at the end of that period of time. Yes. And you got to try and do that across, 14 billion years, and even that's in question now because the James Webb Telescope's seeing stuff that's supposedly way older than that now.
Right.
I mean, we'll see. We're going to find out, like this 3-Eye Atlas thing.
Yeah, what is that thing?
Super weird, right?
Well, Avi Loeb is convinced that it's a UFO. But that's what he does,
yeah,
right?
He
did with that other one, Oumuamua. So that one was a little odd.
That was weird. So it wasn't the weirdest thing about Oumuamua seems to be its path after it turned around the sun and accelerated. Like that was the standard model of physics said it shouldn't have done that, and it seems to have exhibited sort of motion that was not what we predicted it would do. That's as much as we can.
Acceleration.
It accelerated. It was outside.
Noticeable.
Yeah, it accelerated.
But like to a factor of what?
Well, not that. I think it was only a few percent, but it was not what should have happened according to the calculations that astronomers and the orbital dynamics people had done. That's what I understand was the most. Obviously, its shape and size. It was
there was
tumbling.
Something about its reflective properties as well, right?
Well, just because it was so long and narrow and it was tumbling, that's what caused it to. We would catch like the long side of it, which the brightness would increase. So we had this oscillating brightness on it, and then it passed through the system, and it's going, 87 kilometers per second or whatever it was, huge velocity, enough to escape the gravity of the sun, but it accelerated where that's what I understand it did. It accelerated where it shouldn't have. Then there was another interstellar artifact that came in that was pretty much a comet. It behaved like a comet. It had a tail. It was off-gassing water. It's just an interstellar ball of rock and ice is what they say that was. It didn't get a lot of attention. Now this 3i Atlas thing is much larger. It's traveling much faster, apparently, than the previous two, but it's also not behaving like a comet. It has this aura of light that it's emitting around it for some reason. I saw a report that said they're almost seeing a metallic, like smelting signatures off it. I don't know how much credence I can give it, but we'll find out. Like it's going too fast to stop in our system unless it dramatically alters its velocity. But it'll pop out. We'll lose it on the other side of the sun, but then we should see it again on the way out. So we'll know one way or the other if it actually is going to, if it changes behavior. I mean, what's he put it? Avi Loeb put it like 40-60 or something. Artificial to natural, but
really,
dude, it's so funny. I'm into Warhammer 40k in a big way, and it's just like I'm like, okay, we're going to be joining the Imperium here soon, boys. So, all hail the Omnissiah. That thing might be a Mechanicus vessel. I don't know.
If that's how they travel, I'd be very disappointed. They just shoot through the sky. Well, it takes months.
Well, if it slows down,
I know, but I'm looking for portals. I'm looking for, advanced civilization that visits us. I don't want the advanced Vikings. Right. I want the advanced scientists from the 21st century.
Open up the portal.
Yeah. I you know what I'm saying? I mean, the ones who come fast on a burning spaceship, they're the dangerous ones. Because they're probably
right.
Yeah, they're probably the warlike conquerors, the ones who are going to rob us of our minerals and force us into slavery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That seems like if that's how you're rocking it, you're still doing it the way we do it, where you have something thrusting you insanely fast through the cosmos.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Do you know that, like, the whole dark forest thing, like the dark forest theory?
No, what's that?
So this came out of, it was the three-body problem. Great series of books by a Chinese author got turned into a
amazing
TV show.
Netflix show.
Great show. The books are phenomenal too, and it's just, but it's this idea that, look, we shouldn't be making noise. It's like, imagine you're a hunter in a dark forest. So it's just, you're out there. You know there might be other things out there, and it's this like a philosophical engagement of like, what should you do? Should you light a fire and make a whole bunch of noise in the dark forest that's full of it's full of predators. You don't know where they are. They don't know where you are. What's your behavior? What should you do? Should you see another predator? Should you be friendly? What's the risk to you to do it? And these could be like, you could be there with a bow and arrow. This guy could have a tank. This other guy could have some other energy weapon, whatever. You don't. There's massive differences in capability and scale, and pretty much every scenario works out to like what you should do is just be quiet, and if you see something, you should eliminate the threat. That's kind of the way it goes in the dark forest. It's like, it's too risky to reveal yourself. You should basically eliminate that threat if you can do so safely. And you apply that to kind of the galaxy, and to some extent, I feel like we're the equivalent of like a baby in a cot that's screaming around a roaring fire because and there's leopards out there,
right?
And because we're just like sending these signals out into space for 100-something years now. Well, and we just hope, hey, we're friendly, please.
Well, you have to hope that something is so evolved that it's gotten past war, and it's gotten past the way we behave. And so we're hoping and assuming that Space Brothers, Space Brothers will be benevolent and wise beyond our imagination, and that they will come here and want to take care of us and give us information and hook us up.
That's my response. I have this discussion. I've had this discussion a few times, and my response to a lot of that is, well, we can take nature. What happens when we take nature? Let's look at the apex predator, whether it's in the sea, in the air, or on the land. Apex predators don't tolerate competition. They don't suffer any attacks. They don't. I mean, we just dominate. Like if it's in your way, it's inconvenient, you kill it. If it has something you want, we take it. If those bees have honey, we take it. Like, it's just, we're not like helping them. We're not like trying to teach the dolphins how to talk. Like, there's still parts of the world where we're just eating them. Like I don't know. Nature suggests that apex predator, but maybe we're just, I think this is the other element that you're saying, is maybe evolution leads you past those primal nature at some point.
The territorial primate instincts that we
Yeah.
exhibit, like hopefully one day, because clearly we're on a pathway to that, right?
Yeah.
We're clearly much kinder now,
Yeah.
at least locally. You know,
Yeah.
if you don't live in Gaza. You
Well,
know
yeah,
what I'm saying?
right. Yeah,
like,
I
you know what I'm
do,
saying?
yeah.
Like, if you're in the middle of a war zone, you're like, what are you talking about? This is as bad as it's ever been all throughout human history. It's the same behavior exhibited over and over and over again.
Yeah.
What we want is aliens that are 1,000,000 years more advanced. We don't want aliens that are 1,000 years more advanced.
Got it.
Because they might be just like us, but way better.
Yeah, just
That's
better
what we
guns.
don't, right? Because as soon as we start going into the cosmos, if we venture into the cosmos in 20 years, we're going to be the same animal, right?
Right.
We're not going to be significantly different unless we integrate with technology and remove the ego and
And
all the other,
emotions.
yeah, mushrooms.
Well, no, emotions and stuff, but maybe mushrooms helps us get
That
there
too.
for sure. Yeah.
Emotions, all the things, the human reward systems that exist that we,
Yeah.
we currently struggle with, we would be the same way. If we just think of what we justify on Earth in terms of destruction of habitat, of native species, animals that we
Yep.
kill, all the different things that we do on Earth, factory farming. Now imagine, why would we care about these lizard people that live, in caves on some fucking stupid planet? We would probably kidnap them, we'd kill them, we'd
Depends.
pickle them, we'd bring them back home, we'd freeze them.
Got gold in them caves? What
Yeah,
have we got?
right. Look at what Columbus did when they,
Yeah.
arrived
Yeah.
and took the natives and had them get gold, and if they didn't, they cut their arms off. And
Yeah.
did horrific, terrifying things. So imagine, there's no evidence that aliens are currently doing that, which is the promising thing,
Right.
right? Even the abductions, although I'm sure they're terrifying if they're true, they
Yeah.
seem rather benign. Like, in fact, in the Travis Walton case, do you know that one? It's one of the most famous ones.
Not off the top of my head.
Real simple, 1970s, he's a logger. He's working with a group of guys. They see a ship. He runs toward it. He gets hit with a beam of energy, gets knocked back, unconscious. His friends flee. They come back. They're yelling at each other. We got to go back. We got to get him. They go back. He's gone. All four of them get investigated for murder. They tell the story.
Yeah.
No one believes them. They all pass polygraph tests. 5 days later, he shows up. He finds a payphone, makes a phone call, and has this fucking insane story.
Yeah.
But the story was that they took him aboard the craft and healed him and communicated with him, and that there was a bunch of different types of these beings. And then he has been telling the exact same story ever since the 1970s. So, but
Yeah.
relatively benign compared to what we would do.
For sure.
Like we fucking, we shoot elephants.
It turns into
Yeah.
Avatar.
When you think of human evolution, do you ever stop to think, what are we going to be like a million years from now if we do survive? Have you ever done this sort of thought experiment where you say, okay, if things keep going the same way,
Right.
we used to be very strong and very hairy, and we're getting progressively softer as we don't need to use our bodies as much. Our brains are getting larger, our heads are getting bigger. Do you do that sort of thought experiment to see what we're going to become? And
Not in a systematic scientific way, because the process is so fraught with incredible detail that I think it's hard for anybody, even experts in evolutionary biology, to really tell us anything that will hold water, that's really predictive. But on a general level, yeah. I mean, because people often wonder, why is it that we haven't been visited by aliens, right? This is a thing that comes up whenever you're talking about other life inside the
I was going
universe.
to get to that in a minute with you.
Yeah. But the answer to that could be quite straightforward. Nobody out there cares about us because we're so ill-developed. We're so young on the cosmic scene that there's nothing interesting for them to find here on planet Earth. So to me, there's a natural explanation for why there can be other life out there, and yet they don't hang out around planet Earth, just the way we don't hang around an anthill to try to have a conversation with, what's going on inside that particular structure.
I buy that argument the least.
You do? Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
because we're interested in butterflies. Butterflies are so boring. We're interested in moles. We're interested in
interested in
squirrels.
we're interested in them for very specific reasons,
Sure.
right? So typically we're interested either because we want to see the evolutionary development that yields this particular life form, or because there's a general curiosity about how this object is put together. If these other beings are so far beyond us that those kinds of taxonomy questions are no longer of any interest, then hanging around here may not hold any anything for them to make the journey and stick around long enough for us to notice.
I don't buy that, again, for two reasons.
Okay.
One, because why would we assume that they're so far beyond us that they wouldn't be interested in these talking monkeys with thermonuclear weapons who dominate an entire planet?
Yeah.
That would be fascinating. If
Right,
we
but
found some planet
Right.
somewhere where people are, the politicians all lie to themselves, everyone gets video through the sky, they fly in metal tubes that hurl over the oceans,
Right.
they pollute the oceans and eat all the fish. Like, these people are fucking crazy.
Yeah.
We've got to go there and check this out.
But imagine that this civilization, the notion of lording over a planet is like us talking about, the ant lording over a grain of sand. So they may be galactic as opposed to planetary in their hegemony.
Mm-hmm.
And the notion of some little tiny rock orbiting some nondescript star in the suburbs of this completely ordinary galaxy off there on the side may not have the kind of pull that you imagine that it does.
Oh, I disagree. We think it's interesting when we see a chimp use a rock to open up a nut. We think it's interesting that, there's an amazing photograph of an orangutan that's spearfishing. Have you ever seen it?
I have seen that, actually.
It's really
yeah.
cool.
Right. No, it is.
He learned it from people, apparently, but it's
Yeah.
still interesting nonetheless.
Right, but I don't think 100 years from now we're going to be as interested in
Really?
these kind of qualities, or 1,000 years from now, or 10,000 years from now.
Well, why would we assume that these things that come here from another planet are more than 10,000 years?
Well,
advanced?
that's a very good question, and I think the answer to that is we look at the history of the cosmos until today, and let's just call it our universe to be concrete, 13.8 billion years. And we look at life on planet Earth, and it's, a handful of billions of years old. So in a handful of billions of years, you can go from some complex molecules to human beings.
I like how you say it like it's not that long.
It's not that long because,
I know.
Imagine that life began a few billion years earlier in some other system. Stars and galaxies, they were starting up, a billion years after the Big Bang. So it could be that life in other worlds has a head start on us by a few billion years. And we know what can happen in a few billion years. It can take us from single cell to us.
Sure.
And you can imagine from a few billion years from now into the future, it could be radically different. So to say it's 10,000 years ahead of us, that to me would be the unexplained coincidence. How unlikely that they started and we started within 10,000 years in the span of billions of years. That seems unlikely to me.
Does it seem unlikely when you're talking about the infinite size of the universe, and there's perhaps an infinite number of Brian Greens out there talking to an infinite numbers of me?
Good point. So you're absolutely right. We're almost guaranteed, if the spatial expanse of the universe is infinitely large, that there are going to be places where it's within 10,000 years of us. But those are going to be a very small number compared to the places where it's not 10,000 years.
Is that true, or would it be an infinite number of them?
Well, it'd
not
be
a
infinite,
small number at all.
But they're different kinds of infinities.
So you mean in the space of the exact scope of the universe itself, a small number, relatively speaking, to where we are physically?
So I would say it slightly differently. I'd say look at a finite-sized ball in this large spatial expanse. So everything's finite now.
So let's get a 5 billion light year ball.
Right.
Okay.
And within that ball, the number that are differing from us by 10,000 years will be very, very small compared to the number differing from us by, say, a billion years or a couple of billion years.
So then,
simply by the law of numbers, if we imagine that they're random processes that are generated. Now, there could be some physical principle that prevents life from emerging before, say, 4 billion years ago. And if that's the case, and we're not aware of that principle, then you'd be absolutely right, that we'd all be roughly at the same starting point, and there's no reason to suspect that they would be so far ahead of us. But I don't know of any such principle.
But you almost have a reductionist view of this, right? Like so if you had a guess, if you had $100 to bet, has alien life ever observed us? You would say no.
Well, by observed, you mean could they just turn a big telescope in our direction and gather some radio waves? But yes, I would take that bet because, frankly, we've only been generating radio waves for the last, 70 years. So it's only a 70 light year ball around us. And within that small radius, very unlikely that there's been some alien world that's examining us.
So it would have to be something that would be able to recognize our signal and visit us.
Right.
But don't we look at observable planets and solar systems and discover Goldilocks planets.
We do.
And we examine those planets from vast distances away.
Yes.
And wouldn't you assume that a life form that is perhaps thousands of years more advanced than us with the exponential increase in
Yes.
technology, I mean, if they ever got to the point where we are, that they would see these Goldilocks planets as well and recognize that Earth is one of them?
Yes. However, if they are so far away, they're going to be examining Earth as it was hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of years ago.
Right.
So if you truly want them to be examining us in the sense of human presence on planet Earth, then it's a much more difficult proposition to imagine that they've actually been doing that.
Is it possible there's another way to examine things where you're not hampered by the speed of light?
Not
No?
that I know of. I mean, any signal in the
Right.
world that we're aware of is restricted by a special
speed of
theory
travel.
by the speed of travel, which is
Yeah.
now look. There's quantum entanglement,
Mm-hmm.
which is a strange property of the quantum world in which distant objects can behave as if they are one.
Yes.
And in some sense respond instantaneously to an influence in one location at a distant location, no matter how far apart they are. But that isn't really observing. That's more realizing correlations between physical properties at widely separated locations. But I'm not aware of a means of leveraging that to actually observe what's happening in some distant location, even if you do have quantum entangled particles.
Just to give you an example, in my book I talk about Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill in 1939 wrote an essay about the fact that there could be life on other planets, around other stars, and we should search for it. Now, he didn't have a chance to publish it because he became prime minister and then had to fight the Second World War against the Nazi regime. So much money was wasted in that war. If that money was allocated to the search for extraterrestrial life, the way that Churchill envisioned it before the war, we might have known the answer by now. And what I'm saying is this is just an example for how non-intelligent we are. We are not working together towards a better future. We're fighting each other. And that's the answer to your question, that we might not live very long.
But you're saying this as you work at Harvard and as you're writing books on extraterrestrial objects.
Right.
I don't necessarily agree with you. I think there are massive problems with people, but I think we are far better than the human beings that lived 2,000 years ago in that regard. And I think that we will probably be looking back on this day and age and mocking how stupid we are when we are more advanced 2,000 years
I
from
really
today.
hope so, and that's what I'm
I
trying
think
to...
we're moving in that direction.
Well, that's what I'm trying to promote, but I'm not necessarily
I think
as
our
optimistic
cake-
as you are.
I think our cake is still in the oven.
Let's
That's what
hope
I
so.
think. That's what I
I really want that future. But, I'm doing my best, but you can see from the pushback,
Yes.
to which I don't have access because I'm not, I don't have an account on the social media.
Congratulations again for that. I think that's. I think we're moving. I think there's conflict, but I think for whatever reason, the way human beings operate, we oftentimes need conflict in order to make improvements.
Right.
We need a yin and a yang. We need a give and a pull. If we don't have that, we get complacent.
Why
get
can't we understand the best path forward without... it's just like using a GPS system and it says recalculating.
Yes.
Every time we have a crisis, recalculating. So we recalculate our next move based on all the mistakes we've made. Why can't we be smart in the first place?
I think we have biological limitations that are based on our ancestry. And our
Yes,
ancestry is
I agree with
filled
that.
with tribalism and
agree with
chaos, and we're primates. I mean, that's
agree with
part of the problem. And I think that our issue with racism is the same issue that we have when we have religious discrimination or cultural discrimination. It's tribalism.
I agree.
And we are, it's wired into our DNA.
Now, my problem is, why couldn't science, given that, there are billions of Earth-Sun systems within just the Milky Way galaxy, and then 1 trillion galaxies like the Milky Way in the observable volume of the universe. Why can't the mainstream of astronomy simply say, conservatively, just assuming the most conservative, not speculative assumption. Conservatively, we are at the middle of the road, kind of life. It's very likely that we're not unique and special. And let's just look for evidence, search for it. Why should there be a taboo on discussing this subject? That makes no sense. For example, astronomers are now contemplating new telescopes of the future that will cost billions of dollars to taxpayers, okay, that would search for oxygen in the atmospheres of other planets around other stars, because oxygen could be indicative of life, microbial life. I say it will never be conclusive, such a search, even if it costs billions of dollars, because the Earth, for 2 billion years, the first 2 billion years of the Earth's history, didn't have much oxygen in its atmosphere. There were microbes, but the oxygen level was quite low. And then it suddenly rose after 2 billion years, half of its life. So not finding oxygen doesn't mean there is no life. And then if you find oxygen, it can be produced by many natural processes like breaking water molecules or other things. So it will never be conclusive. How can you make a conclusive statement if you find industrial pollution in the same atmosphere? You just search for CFCs. These are the molecules produced by refrigerating systems, by industries. If you find evidence for that, there is no way that nature can make these very complex molecules naturally. So I say to the mainstream of astronomy, use the same instruments and motivate them by this question of, can we detect industrial pollution? And I wrote a paper about it. And the thing is, the public is extremely interested in this question. And the public funds science. So how can the scientific community shy away from a question that it can address with existing technology, when the public is very interested in that? How can there be a taboo on this question? That's the thing that really puzzles me. Now, I wasn't working in this area until the last 5 years or so. I was working in studying black holes, studying the universe, and I came across a number of ideas that led me into this rabbit hole, into this subject. Now I'm about to publish this book at a popular level, but also a textbook 6 months later that describes all the science that we have related to the search for life outside Earth, far from Earth. And I'm just amazed that it's not part of the mainstream. It's really surprising to me, and I think it's inappropriate because you look at physics, theoretical physics, there are lots of speculative ideas in it. Like people talk about extra dimensions, the multiverse, supersymmetry, superstring theory. All of these have no evidence to their credit. There is no experimental test, not even thought about, like in the next decade, the next 2 decades. But these ideas are part of the mainstream. So you see physicists giving each other awards and doing intellectual gymnastics, just demonstrating that they're smart. And to me, that's an unhealthy situation in physics. You can do it in mathematics where it's completely detached from any application to reality. But in physics, we are supposed to describe reality. And yet you have these intellectual... So it's as if the physics community, some parts of it, decided that the most important task is to demonstrate that you're smart. And that is really strange to me because, we're supposed to understand nature, not show that we are smart. Einstein made three big mistakes at the end of his career in the 1930s. He argued that black holes don't exist, gravitational waves don't exist, and quantum mechanics doesn't have spooky action at a distance. He argued all these 3 things at the end of his career when he was the most experienced, And he was wrong. We have experimental data that shows that he was wrong on all 3. And what is the lesson from that? Even the smartest person, that was last century in physics, can be wrong if he works on the frontier, because you never know exactly where the truth lies. Okay, you have to take risks. And if people want to just demonstrate that they are smart, it's better not to take risks. And how do you not take risks? If you work on ideas that will never be tested against data, against evidence. So if you work on superstring theory or on extra dimensions or on the multiverse, you can do intellectual gymnastics and impress your colleagues that you're smart. And you will get jobs, you will get recognition, you will get awards. If that's your goal, that's a completely legitimate framework. But I see it as a violation of our commitment as physicists to understand nature. It's not really about us. Physics is a dialogue with nature. You listen to nature, you see what the experiments are telling you, and you learn. And perhaps you were wrong. You take risks, It's not about your image. It's not getting more likes on Twitter. So that's why I don't really care what my colleagues say. If this object looked unusual, I just talk about it the way I would talk about any other anomaly. And people were asking, why isn't he backing down? Well, I will back down as soon as there is evidence. If I saw a photograph showing that it's a rock, or if I saw some other objects like it, that we definitely have clear evidence that they're naturally produced, then I will give up on it. And I'm not afraid of being wrong. That's part of any work on the frontiers.
This is my thoughts on the quantum physics aspect of this. I think there's not enough people that understand what they're doing to criticize them, so there's no social pressure. The difference between that and the concept of exploring extraterrestrial life is extraterrestrial life is inexorably connected to nonsense. It's inexorably connected. It's connected to crazy people that think that they're talking to aliens and that they're channeling people from another planet.
I have an answer to that.
Okay.
Suppose there was a whole literature on COVID-19 that is completely fictitious. People were saying crazy things about COVID-19 that make no sense whatsoever, and there was
you can find them.
Yeah,
Those
suppose
people are out
there were books about it,
right?
There were films about it. Now, would that mean that scientists, reputable scientists, should not work on a vaccine for COVID?
No. But this
who
is
cares
why that
if there are people
apply.
that say nonsense? You
This is why
don't
that
care. You
doesn't
ignore
apply.
them.
COVID-19 is a real thing, and you can prove it in a lab quickly, instantly. I mean, it's universally acknowledged as being a real thing.
Right.
The problem with extraterrestrial life is there's no evidence that it's real.
Well, but if you step on the grass and you say, look, it doesn't grow, then obviously because you're stepping on it. So if you bully anyone that works on the subject, then young people don't enter into this research field.
Yes.
If you don't fund it at all, you dry it up, then there will not be discoveries.
No,
and then
I
you say,
agree
look,
with
there are
you.
no discoveries. I step on the grass, it doesn't grow. Therefore, there is no point in continuing to wait for it, to grow.
I agree with you. No,
Yeah.
I think it's a side effect of our social interactions. And I think a lot of professors, a lot of people in academia, they come from, maybe more socially awkward environment. They come from a lot of people that get into teaching, a lot of people that get into being professors. They weren't like the class king. They weren't like the most popular person. And social interactions with them, maybe they were bullied. Maybe they Dr. Carl Hart, who's an academic who was on a couple days ago, was actually talking about this very subject. And that a lot of academics, they try to undermine other people's work. And they do so in kind of a bullying fashion.
Yeah, because it's all about the ego. You see,
Yes.
I was asked by the Harvard Gazette, the Harvard University Gazette, which is the Pravda of Harvard, this official newspaper of
I like how you
Harvard.
put it.
They asked me, what is the one thing you would like to change about the world? A very big question.
Yeah.
So I wrote an essay. I said, I want my colleagues to behave more like kids. Because as a kid, I remember that, I was mostly curious about the world. I would not be afraid of making mistakes. I wasn't worried about my ego or something really strange happens to those kids that take risks and are not worried about themselves so much. Something bad happens to them when they become tenured professors in academia. Tenure is supposed to give you the freedom to explore directions that may turn out to be wrong. That's what Einstein demonstrated at the end of his career. So you would expect people to take advantage of that. But instead, once professors become tenured for life, meaning that there is no risk to their job, they are starting to pursue honors and awards, status, recognition.
Yeah.
They are afraid of making mistakes. They build these echo chambers where they have students and postdocs repeating their mantras so that their voice will sound louder, so that they will get even more recognition. Now, I say this, the scientific inquiry is not about us. It's about the dialogue with nature, trying to figure out what nature is. It's not about elevating our status, our image. We will all die in several decades. So, it's really not that. Now, actually, Lex Friedman was asking me, Avi, you know so much. What do you think is the meaning of life?
Heavy.
And I told him, look, I think we just exist. Any meaning that we assign now will go away in 1 billion years because the sun will boil off the oceans on Earth. There will be no life on Earth. All of these things that we call meaning, they are really temporary in the big scheme. We should just enjoy the process, just like eating good food. I will not mention another example. Doing these, like eating good food, you enjoy the process. So learning about the world, figuring out what the world is very enjoyable. If I realize something nobody else did and understand something that nobody else did, it gives me pleasure. So just the process of doing that gives me meaning because I enjoy it. So you should live your life in a way that you enjoy it. If you like good food, that's good enough. You can live your life just eating. That's what animals do.
Yes.
Yeah, right? Can have sex. You can do all kinds. But if you want a deeper sort of satisfaction, I think understanding the world is what humans are capable of doing. And that's really a deeper level of enjoying life, so to speak.
Well, there's a lot of examples of professors going out on a limb, being incorrect, and then being punished, being ridiculed, losing their status in the community, or even being correct, but not having the support of your peers who turn on you and turn against you, and then it turns out ultimately they were correct, but there's very little repercussions for that. And there's this thing that happens with people and ideas where they get scared to take on something that could easily make them look ridiculous. And the best example of that is extraterrestrial life.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get ridiculed for believing in it. It's like Bigfoot and then extraterrestrial life.
No,
Those are
I
the
want
two
to
things.
change that. I say this is a subject the scientific community can address with scientific tools,
Yes.
with telescopes. Let's discuss it. The public is interested. Let's forget about the past and look for a better future, right? And my point is, there are many examples for unborn babies, in science where people were ridiculed and ideas were never pursued or delayed, For example, looking for planets around other stars. That was something that was suggested in 1952 by an astronomer called Otto Struve, who said, if you take Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, put it close to the sun, then it will move the sun back and forth a lot. And you could tell if there is a close-in Jupiter near other stars by looking at their motion, or looking as it occults the star, comes in front of it, transits in front. He suggested that 1952, for 4 decades, astronomers ignored that. Why? Because they said, we know that Jupiter in our solar system is far away, and we understand why it's far away, and therefore we shouldn't waste our time even looking for something like that. Then, in 1995, a couple of astronomers found a hot Jupiter close to a star, and they got the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago for that. So my point is, this is an example of a baby that was eventually born. So people would say, oh yeah, science works, you see, eventually it was found. My point is, it took 4 decades. In those 4 decades, we could have done a lot to advance science. And the other thing is, I say, okay, this baby was born, but there might have been other babies that were not born. Ideas that were put forward and were scrutinized for no good reason, just because people are close-minded. And, the strange thing for me is that I see a lot of innovation in the commercial sector. You see, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Apple, Google, they have parts of their companies that are doing blue sky research, things that are not applied. It all started with IBM and before that. And then in academia, I see a lot of conservatism, much less innovation as in the commercials. Now, the commercial sector is after making a profit. You would expect academia to be even more open-minded, but it's not. And to me, that must change.
Is this something that you had as an idea before publishing these thoughts about extraterrestrial life?
Yeah.
And did that accentuate it for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't expect the response that I received. It doesn't bother me. In my I have more than 800 papers that I published and 8 books. In all of these, I talk about anomalies, over the years, I talked about anomalies in other contexts, like in the early universe. And when I mentioned speculative ideas in other contexts, there was no pushback, It wasn't threatening to anyone. It wasn't, but something about the subject of extraterrestrial life bothers people.
When you discuss the cosmos, maybe the single most intriguing possibility to us as human beings is what other intelligent life, if any, is out there. And how interesting is that to you? Because you spend so much time studying the fundamental particles of the universe itself. How interested are you in the possibility of other intelligent life forms? Or have you just put that out into it's just so ridiculously unlikely or so far away from us that we're probably never going to make contact?
Well, you see, it's not so. There's this SETI program where they're looking to see whether they can see signals from distant civilizations. The problem there, from my perspective, is that although they might be out there, they've got to have had a real head start on us before you would see them. Of course, they might have done so, but then I don't know. You see, actually, Vahir Gurzajan, who's my Armenian colleague, and who looked also for these ring-shaped things, and looked at them in a different way from the Polish people, but we seem to have seen something there. But we wrote a paper in which we speculated on beings from the previous eon communicating with us. And the advantage there is that you're looking at the really advanced civilizations,
really
right at the very end, you
from
see.
Billions of years ago, that their universe disappeared and then had to come back to a Big Bang state again.
The signals could come through, yes.
And somehow or another, those signals remain.
It's conceivable. I agree it's pretty far-fetched, but, who knows what...
So eons, how many billions of years are you talking about? Like the Big Bang was 14 billion?
Yes. But you see, that's where at the beginning, in a sense, or it's three-quarters of the way through in another sense. It depends how you draw the pictures.
Right.
In the sense of interestingness, or in the conformal picture, we are already three-quarters of the way through.
So 14 billion to now, so we have how many billion left?
You can't count it as years, you see. The trouble is it's a cheat.
It's a cheat.
The year count is as much as you like. It depends on something else. The mass has to fade out, and how you measure time becomes problematic. Mm-hmm. And it's either infinity, you see, which isn't much use, or you might have a different definitions of time, which depend on what particle you're using as your clocks and things like that.
So are you essentially saying that it's entirely possible that we are the furthest in terms of our technological achievement and our understanding of the universe itself? It's possible that we're at the front of the line, that there might be some other intelligent life forms in the universe, but they might be behind us.
Well, there would have been... I'm not saying they got through, you see. Well, maybe they have techniques for getting through, but that's a bit hard to imagine. But maybe information from them could get through, and maybe
you mean from the previous eon?
Yes.
Oh, yes. They might have got through, like somehow or another survived.
Yes, but it would have to be in the form of photons or something. Yeah, no, you could. It's not. I'm talking about ridiculous speculation.
Sure,
now.
but encoding information into photons.
Yes.
Wow.
It's conceivable.
Sure.
Now, I don't want to say that I see it happening or anything, but it's not out of the question that they could develop some technology which would get information, which might be them in some sense, across in the form of photons.
But you're not optimistic about current intelligent life somewhere in the universe?
Not too optimistic, just because... well, maybe it took us a long time to get going because the dinosaurs were there for a while, and somebody might have got in there earlier in their different planet, and they could have got there quite ahead of us. It's conceivable. I'm not going to rule it out. I'm just not terribly optimistic about it. No, I think it's worth doing. It's worth looking.
Yes, but it's not something that you're really curious about.
I'm expecting. It's not so much. I'd be curious certainly, but I'm not expecting it, I guess.
Is it just because of the overall lack of real evidence, and it's just not an attractive thing for you to pursue?
It's quite attractive.
It certainly would be. I don't know.
I've just been doing other things, and I don't know. There's enough to do in the world. I haven't really come to terms with it very hugely. So I know there's this activity, and I'd be interested to see if any kind of, if there was this thing that came past that some people speculated was sent there by a different intelligence, which came quite close in our solar system.
Oh, that was that strange-looking cigar-shaped.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see any real reason to believe it's an alien spaceship.
Was it because of the way it was traveling? That was the idea?
It was something.
Something curious about it?
Serious people did suggest it might be something sent by an alien civilization. Well, it's worth, if one could connect with it in some way. But I don't know. I guess it's too far away now.
Well, it's another thing that's so uniquely fascinating for us, the concept of another life form out there.
Oh, sure. Yes.
But the question is, why would we assume that it's a biological entity? It doesn't have any windows. It's this round thing that looks like a Tic Tac. If there is some sort of advanced propulsion system, some revolutionary way of moving through space and time that the U.S. government has developed, in some black ops program, that seems very likely impossible. That seems more likely than aliens visiting us. But there's more than one incident, and there's a lot of these things. And the possibility of alien life in the universe, although we've never experienced it, seems rational. It seems very rational. And if you were going to study an emerging civilization that is both primitive and warlike and yet insanely technologically advanced to the point where they have nuclear weapons, they can transmit video through the sky, they have propaganda, they have tracking of their citizens, that's us. Mm-hmm. That's us right now. And while we are these territorial primal beings with fucking nuclear weapons, this would be a good time to start exposing yourself.
Yes.
And to stop this nonsense.
Insanity.
Yeah. And look, the reason why we named the rooms at our club Fat Man and Little Boy is because in UFO lore, that's when they started showing up. After the detonation of the atomic bombs in Japan, that's when the UFO sightings ramped up.
And they ramped up mostly in the U.S., right?
Yes.
So that's interesting because the U.S. was the nuclear power. So.
And we were the one who was doing a lot of fucking testing.
Yeah.
And also we have all these military bases. Who the fuck has more military bases than us?
No one.
Who has more nuclear weapons pointed at other people than us? We have them all over the place. And there's all these multiple sightings and eyewitness accounts of very credible people who say these things have hovered over military bases.
It'd be pretty cool if these aliens were benevolent overlords. And they were like, hey, my children.
Yeah. Or maybe even so advanced intellectually that the concept of an overlord is preposterous. And they're just biological management. There's just the gardeners tending to make sure the weeds don't get out of hand and just let this process continue to play itself out. Because this process of technological innovation it's the everything that humans do.
Yeah.
It's what we do at the pinnacle of our creation is we make better technology.
Well, I always wonder about fractals and whether or not, this idea of this being a simulation, this being, we are kind of replicating, we are creating machines and doing our best to create them in our own image, right?
Yes.
And that's interesting. That's because the mythologies that we subscribe to are the idea that this God that we pray to made us in his image. Right. And we're doing the same thing now with robots and computers. And that's an interesting thing that we seem to have this sort of paradigm, this idea that that's the scaffolding for the way we think, right? And to what end? And why are we doing that?
Maybe it's the creation
has it
of
already
a new
happened?
life form.
But has it already happened? Are we the result of that impulse that happened a long time ago?
I think we are the shit-throwing chimps that are going to become the nuclear physicists.
That's what
we are the shit-throwing chimps from 2001 that become Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think this thing that we become is integrated with technology. It's probably some sort of a hybrid. It's some sort of a cyborg.
That's wild.
Because I think we're already on the verge of merging. All this talk of Neuralink and all these various things. We watched this video the other day of this guy who was Googling questions and getting answers in his head with his headpiece on. Have you seen that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Incredible. right? So how long before that is like that's Pong?
I know, but that's
and then you have the Unreal 4 engine in 2023 that looks like a movie.
No.
Like how long before that technology gets to the point where it's just supremely advanced, and we literally are like gods?
But my question really is also the idea that that's engineering, right? That's a tool.
It's innovation.
But there's engineering. So there are two aspects to it. One is getting information faster and stuff, which doesn't get you closer to truth, but it gets you information faster. There are endless facts. But more importantly, I always wonder, like, why we are given this. I really believe that human potential is pretty much infinite. Whatever you can imagine and beyond, we can do, and we are doing. We seem to be doing this. Like, think about how crazy that is. I can wear a headset and I can do things with my mind and look up the answer.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's magic. It's crazier than magic. But there's a way to measure that and quantify that and replicate that. So it's not magic. I can do it and I can tell you exactly how I get there, which is even crazier. So what is that leading us to? It is nudging us closer. It's like I think it's very significant that we're getting a better understanding of what it's like to be someone else.
Yeah.
We are. It's really hard to say that a Yanomamo Indian or whoever it might be thinks about things differently than I do, when I know so much about how all these human beings, like someone in Iran, someone in Jordan, laughs and cries and bleeds at the same thing I do. It's being prejudiced based on what that person looks like over there is becoming harder and harder to justify. Where it was before we knew about that, we were like, well, those people over there are quote unquote savages, or they're this, that, and the other thing. And I do think that we are getting a better understanding of what it's like to be each other and being nudged in the same direction. I'm not saying we don't become tribal.
I think that's true too.
But why? And it's interesting to think about where that's leading us to what understanding, and then when we have that understanding, what are we going to do about that?
Right, and are we going to pull it together? And are the aliens here to make sure that we don't fuck it up?
Yeah.
That's the beautiful idea. The terrible idea is that it's all us, and then it's all a big ruse, and it's all just drones that we're doing because we don't want China and Russia to know about it. But we have insane propulsion systems that operate on gravity, and
I think it is us.
But
I hate to tell you.
It seems like both. It seems like us, and it also seems like there's some shit that we just don't understand. And I don't know if those people are telling the truth. Because if the people that are telling the truth that there's biological entities, and this is what Jackie Gleason said that Nixon told him, and Nixon took him on they were drinking. You know that famous story?
No.
Who knows if it's true? It's a legend. But the legend is that Jackie Gleason and Nixon were drinking, and that Nixon said, you want to see some fucking aliens? And they get on Air Force One, and they fly to some Air Force base, and they go to a place where they have a crashed UFO, and they have biological beings that are in freezers. And Jackie Gleason sees this. And Jackie Gleason, after that, has a house built in upstate New York that looks like a UFO. He became obsessed with UFOs after that. There was a house, it was actually for sale at one point in time. Yeah, so he has this house that he had shaped like a UFO. And this is like, who knows if this is a true story? Yeah. Right? Because it's like, it was kind of sort of disputed. His ex-wife told the story or something like that. I forget.
I think that kind of thing is actually impossible to keep secret.
No, I don't think so.
Really?
No, I don't think so.
You think generational, generations of government bureaucrats can keep something a secret?
Sure,
I don't
they
think
tell
so.
the people at the very highest level know about it. It's very few people. It's all very compartmentalized.
They're always,
they monitor everyone's phone calls, everyone's emails, everything everyone does.
Impossible.
At a top secret clearance level?
No way. Impossible.
I don't think you're right.
Totally impossible.
You're definitely not right.
I think it's impossible.
Listen, man, they can keep secrets.
When?
People
Which
at high levels of military can keep secrets.
Yeah, but they're always rotating out. They're retiring. They're dying.
Yeah, they probably wind up fucking Hillary Clinton and a lot of those dudes.
Hey, listen, dude. This is not this is not Conspiracy Social Club. This is the Joe Rogan experience.
I am not willing to relinquish the idea that they could keep that secret.
Well, that's because it's fun to believe in.
Yeah, but it's not just fun to believe in. It is possible. It's a physically possible thing to do, especially if you have the right people and they're indoctrinated in the right way with top secret clearance. And by the way, it's not like these people don't tell their friends, and it's not like there's a bunch of stories floating around, because there are. There's a shitload of stories.
That's what I'm saying.
Around.
But why would you like? I would never keep that a secret. I'd be like, hey, you got fucking aliens.
Here's the thing: when you have senators and congressmen who find out about this, and they find out that military contractors are the ones who have access to this stuff, because the back engineering program has to involve someone who has the capability of recreating this. So who would that be? That would be the people that make jets. If you got someone who's making you a fucking a stealth bomber, and you have a crashed UFO, those are the people that you want discussing like what kind of things you've recovered from a fucking alien crash, and can this be replicated?
No, here's a problem with your whole
don't
theory.
you know me, motherfucker? Because you don't know. You might be wrong.
This is your wrong. No.
Don't say you're wrong, because you don't know that I'm wrong.
This is the problem with your theory. Ready?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and I love that you want to believe in this, and so do I, but here's the problem.
Okay.
There's no law. There's no written law that says I'm not allowed to talk about aliens. And I mean at the top levels of clearance, like the most secret level. There is no world where if I'm a government official and I take a bunch of pictures and I come before Congress and I go, here's my evidence, I'm blowing the whistle, there are real aliens.
You don't think they would go after you for
I'd never go to jail.
Violating your top secret clearance?
No, because it's not violating my top secret clearance.
But it would be.
Nope.
I don't
Because
think you're right.
I'd never go to jail for that. Because I'd be like, you're going to put me in jail for exposing what everybody wants to know? The whole world would be like, holy shit, you guys kept this a secret?
But that's assuming that you have access to that material to extract
there are enough people who
from
would.
wherever maybe not. Maybe those are the kind of people that wouldn't do that, Brian.
Listen,
you fucking
friend.
communist. I don't like the way you think.
I'm shredding your UFO theories.
No, you're not.
Listen,
you think you are, but you're just using these establishment.
You're allowed to talk
points.
about UFOs and you never get in trouble.
You sound like your dad.
Come on, man. First,
you're
tell me
a CIA
Schultz will beat me up.
You're a CIA
I'll call my dad
stooge,
right now.
And you're in here spreading propaganda to the faithful listeners.
Listen to me. Listen to me. There are no aliens, and if there are, we'd know about it because it's
if
not
there is,
against
you're going to
the
come
law.
back on dressed like a clown. Agreed?
Agreed.
That's my bets I'm making with everybody now.
I'll dress up like
you
a
gotta
clown.
dress like a clown.
I'll do it.